Hi guys. So there are many reasons to include a collection policy in a library, and one of the most important ones to me is that it provides guidance. I am brand new to a library position. This year is my first year, and a collection policy can define what should even be in a collection. It can give a lot of information about what should be included or not included so that I know what to weed or what to purchase. It can also instruct on how to process, catalog, maintain, and evaluate what's in a collection. And I think what's really helpful is that it lists out criteria for making selections. So when I have dollars to spend, I know exactly kind of as a checklist, like what should I be looking for in a book to purchase. And one thing that I really appreciated about the Kyle article that we all read is that it states that good books are really just books that kids like. So we may want to include those quality titles that we think of as having like literary merit, but we probably also want to include appealing titles. So titles that kids just like Dog Man or Wimpy Kid books. And obviously we want to find those books that have the marriage of both, but that there's no shame in including those books that we just know kids are going to pick up that are going to circulate highly as well. And so I might include something like that in my collection policy in the future, something about appeal to students. The second important reason to have a collection policy, in my opinion, is that it helps to avoid confusion. Again, being new to this role, I appreciate the transparency in role assignments. So I know what I'm responsible for. I know what the head librarian for the district is responsible for. I know what tasks I can give to a volunteer who comes into the library. And I think that it also helps to ensure consistency in how those tasks are carried out. So I do have an aide who comes in for 30 minutes a day, and 30 minutes is not a lot of time to train somebody. So a collection policy, it can help me to kind of say like, hey, here's how we're going to do these things. And so I think that it's helpful for training and for assessment purposes too, because then I can look at my collection and say, this is what I said my collection should look like. Does my collection actually look that way? So it helps to avoid confusion or uncertainty in those ways. And then I think ultimately it does help to lend legitimacy to what we're doing in the library. It can help inform the public about our roles in the library, that what we actually do and the services that we provide. And I think that it also can show that a lot of thought and care goes into the decisions that we're making, that we're not just like on Amazon, picking top 10 books that we find or scrolling through and finding books that have nice covers, but we are really putting a lot of thought and care into the decisions that we're making. And I think that that's incredibly important right now in the current climate that we have here in Texas, where we have this new legislation and there are a lot of eyes on the selection decisions that we're making. Like I know in my decision or in my district, we have to run our entire collection through a program to check to see if any titles have been banned or challenged before. And then we have to either weed those titles or click to accept those books and add a note as to why we're keeping it. And so I think a collection policy really provides a framework for that kind of decision making, and also ensures that we are not in that process engaging in self-censorship. And so I did find this article by Tudor, Moore, and Byrne called Silence in the Stacks, an Exploration of Self-Censorship in High School Libraries. And it was an analysis of 90 Texas high school library catalogs. And what they did was, instead of surveying people because they were worried about bias in self-reported self-censorship, they just looked at the catalogs of these 90 high schools and they looked for 55 highly controversial titles. And they found that larger schools with larger enrollment, tended to have more controversial titles. That was not surprising to them. And they just determined that overall, librarians were not engaging in self-censorship. However, they did find that books featuring LGBTQ characters and themes or sexual content of any kind were the least likely to be included in catalogs, but also the most likely to be challenged. So they concluded that librarians may be self-censoring when it comes to this particular content. And I think that this is definitely important because LGBTQ youth are a very fragile population. They have a high suicide rate, high risk of mental health and mental health issues. And so I think representation for these children is just as important as it is for students and other marginalized groups. And ultimately, self-censorship limits access to information and to diverse perspectives, which is the opposite of what we are trying to do as librarians. And so we do need to be aware of any biases that we may hold so that we can check ourselves and ensure that we are not subconsciously engaging in self-censorship, because it can be detrimental to the students that we serve. And these are my references.